Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Stein Haven, and I'm going to be talking to you today about Charlie Chaplin's experience with First National Pictures. As you can see from this disclaimer, I'm just going to be talking about a short time period of this particular contract, beginning from the beginning until and through his filming of A Dog's Life. What I basically am going to be talking about is the contract itself, and then I want to share with you something that's not up on the archive database yet, and that's the First National commemorative scrapbook that was given to Chaplin after the success of A Dog's Life. And these are some of the preliminary findings that I'm gathering together for my new book on this topic. Just a brief history of First National, which you probably don't know anything about. It was formed on April 27th at the Astor Hotel in New York City, and it was really started by a guy named J.D. Williams, who had formed a similar group in Australia beforehand. He got together 50 exhibitors who signed onto the project initially, and that grew over time. It marks the first such organization of state right buyers and exhibitors, and their purpose was to purchase big feature films and have the right to release them throughout the country without going through a middleman, which the middleman, of course, was costing them a lot of money. So its initial leaders were S.L. Rothapfel, who was the president, T.L. Talley, the vice president, and Harry Schwalbe, who was the secretary. Their initial representatives, these are the guys that were out, the footmen out around trying to get new members and trying to work deals with films and stars, were J.D. Williams, T.L. Talley again, and E.B. Johnston. As far as signing Charlie Chaplin, this became an initial priority. They knew Chaplin was at the end of his mutual contract. They did not know that he was not interested in continuing with Mutual, even though it had been a good relationship between Chaplin and the Mutual Films people. He was ready to move on, and of course Sidney knew this. Sidney was his usual negotiator. So while First National's first film that they acquired was called On Trial, a film that S&A had made and produced, they announced shortly thereafter that they were working a deal with Chaplin, and they actually signed him on July 14th, 1917. Now, that particular date is a little later than what you will get when I show you one of the contracts itself, which says June 19th. So basically what happened was that Sidney went to New York and worked the deal. It was signed there by the higher-ups, and then it had to travel back to Charlie, be reviewed, and signed there. So Charlie actually signed it on July 14th, and that's when it became legal at that point. So his deal included $1,075,000 for 8 pictures over 16 months. The difference this time is that well, there's several differences, and I probably won't hit them all right now, but one of the differences is that he had more time to create fewer pictures. So that gave him a lot more creative license. The second thing is he was covering all production costs himself, so he would only be paid once he turned in something. And the length of the film did not matter to First National, so he would be paid the same for a 2,000-foot reel of film as opposed to a 3,250-foot reel of film. So they were not interested in something they called padding. So in other words, they didn't want extra bits in there that were not helpful to the plot or the storyline, just to get more money for the star himself. This was totally new, of course. Now, as we all know, Chaplin ended up piecing together films just to complete the contract. So he wasn't really padding those films, but he was, in essence, submitting films that he would not have considered to be quite his artistic standard of merit, not quite his level of artistic merit that he would normally do, such as I suggested in my intros, Sunnyside and A Day's Pleasure, for instance. And then he had a lot of trouble with the kid, which ended up being 4 reels, and he wasn't really going to be paid extra for those 4 reels because of this type of contract. So good things and bad things about this contract. Lots of creative leeway for him, and lots of money to be made as well. And of course, Sidney was the negotiator as usual. Now here's a picture of one of the contracts. This is not the contract that details everything that I just talked about. If you look closely at this one, basically what this is the contract for the sign-on bonus, which was essentially $200,000 and $500. And so what this ensures is it suggests that Sidney went home with $20,000 in his pocket to give to Charlie, and that was free and clear. If Charlie didn't sign that contract, he kept the $20,000. No big deal. If he signed the contract, he would then receive $200,500 in either a payment of $175,000 and then the rest of it, or some other, breakdown of those two amounts. That's all this is, basically. But you can see over here that it's signed by Charlie, Sidney, Roth Affel, and Harry Schwalbe. Those are the 4 people that signed it here. So this is just one contract of probably many that he had to sign. It's only a 2-pager, but I just wanted to give you something to look at. This is what you'll see also if you go into the archive and look at documents. And you can, when you're in there, you can hit the size up button, and so that you can read them better as well. And this is what the press covered. So the headline says, Chaplin formally signs contract with Circuit, which means the First National Exhibitors Circuit, of course. And this long article here goes into the details of the contract, which I just gave you. It also has a long passage of quotation from one of the brass. It's in quotes. It does not provide the name of the person. But then it ends up talking about J.D. Williams and his history over here. This section here talks about the troubles that Charlie's experiencing with the First World War, people saying that he should be, at the front and not making pictures in America, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of a statement, which I have given in its entirety later on in this program, about Charlie's war efforts. And just basically how excited First National is to have signed, and they should have been. I mean, think about it. First National was essentially 3 months old, and they've signed one of the biggest stars going, pretty much. I'd say they're doing pretty good. Now, at this point, Charlie's signed, but he hasn't gotten started yet. The first thing he wants to do is build a studio. And so he spends most of the rest of 1917 doing that. And I'm not going to go into the details of that. Some of us know the story already anyway. But this is kind of, this is a nice little snapshot of what the studio kind of looked like. But we can talk about that another time. But that took him on into January of 1918, which is when he got started on his first picture. So filming A Dog's Life, just some brief facts on that. And of course, I don't know if A Dog's Life's on the schedule of films suggested for this festival, but it's certainly one that's worth looking at any time. So the brass expected, I read this in the literature, it seems like a long time to expect the first film to be ready in October of 1918. Maybe they meant October of 1917. I'm not sure. But I know that they were hounding Sydney for the first film by February of 1918. So maybe the press just got that wrong. I'm not sure. That seems like a long time to be expecting the first film. Filming began on January 15th, as I said, after the studio was 99% finished. And of course, David Robinson provides a nice storyline about how Mutt was selected out of a long process of looking for the proper dog and deciding upon a pound individual named Mutt, who became Scraps. Besides the usual studio regulars that he brought with him from the Lone Star Studios, Sans, of course, Eric Campbell, who had died in a car accident. We have Granville Redmond, the hearing impaired artist who became a regular in some of the First National films. He plays the saloon owner. We have Sid Chaplin playing in a few of these films because essentially he's not gained his first film contract with anybody else yet. That's going to happen in 1919. So he plays the lunch wagon owner in one of the most endearing scenes of the film. And we have Chuck Reasoner as the employment office clerk, and so we're going to see Chuck a lot in these films as well. Minnie Chaplin is indeed in this film, and we can thank Steve Massa for identifying her in the saloon scene through careful detection, and my next slide will show her for you. She is the burlesque dancer on stage. She's not amongst the dancers on the floor, which is where we've all been looking for her for years. So I will show that picture to you, and then you will never be able to not see her in that scene again. The film wrapped up on March 22nd, so it took him a couple of months time to finish it up, and the production was then completed on April 9th, and it was out to theaters by the 22nd of April. So, and you can tell it, if you can't really say, okay, that's definitely Minnie, you can look at her face and the nose and know that that's Minnie. Definitely, no doubt about it. Okay, First National's reaction, of course, was not mixed at all. Totally delighted, thankful, exuberant, exclamatory, whatever you want. But we can gauge perhaps that reaction by looking at this commemorative scrapbook, which is quite large. I would say, I'm not sure the dimensions of it, but I think it has probably upwards of 70 pages inside of it, and it has a lot of different kinds of things in it, and I'm going to show you a representative sample. And it has embossed in gold in it the Charlie Chaplin signature with compliments of First National Pictures and their logo. And then I thought this was an odd thing to place in there. When I first saw this, I thought it was a sort of a dedication to Charlie. You can see Charlie's name down here. Let's see if I can point that out. Yeah, right here you can see Charlie's name. But in fact, this is to T.L. Talley, to T.L. Talley. And congratulations for signing Charlie. So all this, old English script and everything is to thank Talley for signing Charlie, basically. So Talley's up here in the middle. We can see him here, kind of barely. Over here is Roth Apfel, and here is Williams. Now you can see that they've actually made Charlie. He's very light here, but they've made him one of the brass. It looks like there's no other star in that sort of pantheon of people for first. All these other guys are members of the exchange. So I thought that was kind of interesting that they included Charlie in there. That's the first page. And hereafter we have page after page of things pasted in, ads. So we can see in this ad, here's a cutout from a film scene. This is Granville Redmond here with Charlie and Edna, and not a foot of padding. So this is something that they're really interested in promoting, that they are not padding pictures with a bunch of junk. Everything you get is an artistic masterpiece, right? So they're not paying Chaplin for any overage of crap. So only 11 short subtitles. This is another thing. So what you're seeing is top quality, and we're not, poking in a bunch of subtitles to take up space either. This is important. What you're seeing here is, the epitome of art, the epitome of silent film art as it can be done. Over here is another, it's to the exhibitors about how you can double the amount of money that you usually take in for a movie of this type, basically. That's the one type of thing that you might find. Many, many pages of things like this. Many of the 50, sorry, my nose itches. Many of the things that you see are typed letters, and they all have the First National logo on them, but they are members of the exchange, different theaters and places across the country who are sending their congratulations to Charlie in one way or the other. And then you will have newspaper articles from those same towns that are pasted in. Okay, I don't know about you, but I love scrapbooks. I think I have a collection of them of different, times and places of film celebrities and things like that. I think they're fascinating. They're such a cultural artifact that you can get so much information from. And I haven't seen these in person yet. I've only seen them electronically, so I'm excited to actually see them one day. Some of the pages contain photographs of Marquee Displays. So here we have a couple from Boston, and you can see the people out front. You can see the way they've been decorated here. Or we have a 2-page spread from something like Motion Picture News or Motography or Moving Picture World, something like that, where Charlie is tipping his hat to all of the different reviews that he's received. And you've got little snippet reviews from many different venues all over the country and the world. This one I thought was really nice, full color, 2-page spread of scenes from a dog's life, and you could probably recognize many of these. The employment office, the saloon where he's got the dog in his pants, and this is a very iconic one here. At the end, the farming scene, which I think is just a delightful ending with Edna. And of course the beginning part with the cop and all that sort of thing. That's a beautifully drawn piece. Source. Here you have the iconic Chaplin head with an ad pasted on top of it. And a typical exhibitor's letter here again. You should be able to read that. Sorry, I was going to read it for you, but it's really small. I think you should be able to read it, actually. It's very congratulatory, and I think it would be hard for each one of them to think of something different to say to Charlie, really. These two I like. This is Liberty magazine with the iconic Charlie and the dog scene on it. This one I adore here with Charlie and his dog, kicking up a sort of a globe with Charlie's civvy face on top, and it says something about his real life story will be told in the following pages or something like that. And in fact, the next slide has that particular set. This is by, the artist is called, I can't see it again. I should have looked at that beforehand. But you can see, I'm sure you can read most of this. His parents were in France when he was born. No. He went on stage at the age of 12. No. So, if you follow around the numbers, you can see that most of this, he's still giving out false information to people who want to know his life story. This is 1918 now, and nobody still has a clue about what went on in his life, pretty much. So, real interesting to follow this around and see how much of it is any sort of glimmer of the truth. Not much. So, the fact that he built a studio, yes, okay, that's pretty true. He made $1 million, yeah. Does he weigh 120 pounds? I don't think so. Maybe 135. But is he 29? Yes. That's true. Many of the pages are just very scrapbook-like with all of the cuttings and everything. They're not very artistically put together, but I'm sure they had some schlep clerk in the office put this thing together. So, and this I thought was interesting because it suggests that you can buy this artistic likeness of Charlie as the Tramp. So, a sort of a merchandising effort on the part of First National. I'm probably looking back at S&A and realizing, all of the merchandising that had gone on back in those days and wanting to do something similar. And then, of course, Film Fun. We're all, I think, pretty much familiar with the great Film Fun covers, full color illustrations, very, very beautiful. And then the insides are sometimes very disappointing, but this was a nice compilation of film scenes from a dog's life. That's quite nice on the inside. But, I've purchased the Film Funs before just for the cover, because why not? They're quite expensive. Can be quite expensive. Sometimes you can find them more cheaply. And that's, that's certainly not all of the pages of the scrapbook, but that's a nice sampling for you of what's in the scrapbook. There's probably a good 40 more pages plus. And for my research, I will be going over them each with a fine-tooth comb to see what I can find out to apply to my book. Of course, I'm a huge detail-oriented person, as you know, if you've read my books. So I like to find those tiny details that nobody else has noticed and throw them in if I can. So hopefully you've enjoyed that aspect of the show. So as soon as Charlie was finished with the film, April 9th, he hopped on a train to Washington and joined his buddies Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks for the Third Liberty Loan Tour. So he was quite cognizant of the fact that he needed to do something patriotic. He was getting white feathers in the mail from Britain. He was getting all kinds of hate mail about the fact that he wasn't serving. So he wanted to try to do something as best as he could. So, and here we have actually the second stop of the tour, which is Wall Street in New York City. And you can see the huge crowds. And of course, Charlie is standing on Doug's shoulders in a typical fashion there. And Mary has to be around there someplace. I'm not sure where. And as David Robinson tells us, he bought a brand new blue serge wasp waisted suit for the occasion, and looks quite natty there. But that was his last meeting with all three of them until much later. So in the meantime, First National felt the need to put out a statement, and they did that in that particular Moving Picture World article that I showed you a little bit earlier. And here it is. Mr. Chaplin's pictures are giving the soldiers in the trenches the greatest relaxation they could find. In addition to that, he is buying war stocks heavily. Mr. Chaplin has a perfect right to resent being termed, in any sense, a slacker. He is doing 1,000 times more good for the world by doing what he is than if he were in the trenches. People fail to realize that at this depressing time, the man who can make them smile and forget the terrible worldwide gloom is doing a real good for humanity. So that's First National's take on the whole thing. And of course, being his boss, they had to make some sort of statement on that issue. I've always been interested in this tour because nobody's really done much work on it. So one of the chapters of my new book is going to be on the tour. And Charlie had the southern route, and I'm really kind of interested in the impact that he had on the southern states in terms of his popularity. So some of the places that I've found that he did go, of course, Washington and New York, Petersburg, Virginia, Bowling Green, Kentucky, Greensboro, North Carolina, Lexington, North Carolina, Fort Jackson, South Carolina, which is a base, Nashville, Tennessee, New Orleans, Louisiana, and others. I'm sure there are many, many others. And I will be looking for those in the coming months and trying to find any news clippings or accounts of the impact that he made in certain places. And most of what I found so far has been totally positive, even though he was dead tired. I mean, this is following his first cutting together of A Dog's Life, which was a 3 days and nights affair for him. Landing on the train to New York and sleeping for 2 days or something like that. I don't know, but anyway, he was quite tired. So one of the pictures that I found online, and this is a very nice picture of Chaplin in Nashville, Tennessee. And you can see that he's not alone. He's got Rob Wagner with him. This is Rob. Let's see. So I get the little highlighter here. You can see Rob Wagner right here. And this is Rob here in the car. And if you don't know who Rob Wagner is, you should. Rob was very influential in his kind of mentoring Charlie in the teens. You can see lots of pictures of him in the archive. He went to Hawaii with Charlie and Edna in 1918 as a sort of a pseudo chaperone or something. But he was a writer, a politician, great thinker. He had a magazine called The Script, and actually Charlie published a lot of things in there over the years. And you might want to check out copies of that if you can find it and see what he wrote in there. Some of them are quite interesting. And as you can see, he's quite a bit older than Charlie, so certainly taking on a sort of a fatherly, mentorly sort of role in Charlie's life. But anyway, that's one of the stops on the tour. And then after all of this was over, and he did bow out early, I understand. He had quite a few more stops on the tour that he did not go to. He ended up back in Los Angeles to begin his next film, which he titled initially Camouflage, which would become Shoulder Arms. And as David Robinson notes in his book, Charlie had kind of come up with this idea, including all three acts for the film, as he was traveling around. So really the time off was good, because he came back with an idea, which oftentimes when he starts films, he doesn't really have that much of an idea going into them. That kind of formulates along the way. He started filming in late May 1918 when he had returned, but filming was interrupted by at least one visit by Marie Dressler and probably some other folks along the way. And then by the compunction to make a quick patriotic short, Doug was doing one, Mary was doing one. It was a thing to do. And so we have the bond. And he shot the bond in exactly 6 days. So I'm sure if you haven't seen that one, you can easily find that on YouTube as well. It's a very Art Deco-y looking. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that was shot in 6 days because it just has so much artistic beauty to it. To me, it's a fantastic little short. And then getting back to Shoulder Arms, that was completed by September 16th, 1918. And if you've heard some of the stories about the filming, you know that when Charlie's hiding himself in the tree, he's in the tree costume. We're talking mid-August in California, and it was quite hot filming some of those scenes where they're running around in those big, thick, heavy military costumes, and also the tree costume was quite demanding in terms of the heat problem. Shoulder Arms was another big hit for Charlie in First National, but then what followed was Marriage to Mildred Harris and The Loss of a Baby. And if you want some of that story, you can go to my introductions for Sunnyside and A Day's Pleasure. And again, a big thank you to my regular people, Roy Export SAS, which can be found at charliechaplin.com. If you haven't gone there, please do. There's lots to see, including a whole page of essays on different aspects of Chaplin's life, many of which I've written myself. Arnold Lozano has written many of them. Kay Guillemvarch has written many of them. I think there's some by other people like maybe Jim Lochner and others. CharlieChaplinArchive.org, which is the data archive database that you can go into and look at actual documents online. You can read all of them unless they are labeled private. David Robinson's book, His Life and Art. The Media History Project, where you can find industry mags in their entirety. Simply put in a search term, and you will come up with all kinds of articles from periodicals all the way back. And of course, the Niles Film Museum and Rena Keene, who was kind enough to ask me to do this. Thank you all, and I hope you enjoyed Charlie Chaplin Days this year.